Demon-Kissed, Chapter 9. 1. I ain't your boy. 2. What are you doing with my siblings? The boy said, and pointed to the bear cubs I still held off of the floor upside down beside the desk. Keeping them out of trouble. None, kitten, don't put that in your mouth, I said, and removed my pen from Joan's grasp. When she started to cry, I gave her my pocket watch and showed her how to open it. Satisfied that she was occupied, I returned my gaze to the young man on the other side of the desk. His scent said he was some kind of avian shifter, but I couldn't quite place which kind. He was looking from me to his sister and back again in awe. "You're good with babies," he said, and then blinked, frowning again. "I have handled a few over the centuries," I replied, and flipped the bear cubs right side up again, making them giggle like hyena pups. "You don't act like a bad guy, and you sure don't talk like one, mister," he said, voice puzzled. "I am, though, as I'm sure your mother has told you all vampires are bad," I said, then added, "Derek, if you lay one finger on my record player, I will slowly peel the skin from your bones and leave it for the hyenas on Fifth Avenue to play with," and glanced behind me to see the young fox put his hands in his pockets and give me an innocent smile. "You are really good with babies. How'd you know he was over there, anyway?" the young avian said, and approaching the desk, continued. "Ma never knows what he's up to until he's already done it." I gave the boy a fang-bearing smile and levitated Derek over my head and desk. "I am a master vampire," I told him, and set Derek down beside him. No, my statement did not tell him how I knew the fox was behind me, but it did say much about my power. "Raven, he was asking us about how old we was and our names," the male bear cub said. "Why would he ask you that when he can just read your minds?" the boy asked. "I am not rude. Just reading someone's mind without permission is rude," I said before Barnaby could answer him. "So you're a bad master vamp who's polite. Gotcha," he said, nodding. "An astute boy, ain't he, boss?" Graham asked from the doorway, and I looked over at him drolly. "Yes, he is, and you are late," I said, glancing at the drool-covered face of my watch as the children started at the sound of his voice. "Hide your scent, my friend. This one's nose is better than most her age," I told him mentally, and stood with Joan in the bend of my left arm. "Come, off to bed with you lot. Raven, was it?" I said, handing the boy Joan, and he nodded as he took her. "Raven, take your siblings upstairs and make sure they go to bed. Third door to the left of your mother's room," I instructed, setting the bear cubs on the floor and releasing my hold on them. I watched the children leave the office and wondered if, perhaps, I should have been the one to rescue them instead of sending word to Aaron about them. It felt good to be around children again, to have them in my home and to listen to them talk and laugh. "Why do we have kids in the house, boss?" Graham asked when the children were out of earshot. I resumed my seat and crossed my arms on the top of the desk. "Your sister," I answered, gazing at him intently. "What?" he nearly shouted, then lowered his voice and continued. "What do you mean, my sister? Last I knew she was clear across town and wouldn't give you the time of day." "She was, she will not, and the children are hers, all 14 of them," I said, leaning back in the chair, and watched his face as he digested that. "Was? Wait, why would she give you 14 kids to keep track of? How'd she get 14 kids anyway?" he asked, and closed the door before walking toward the desk. I sent word to her whenever there was a young one in trouble. She didn't give them to me to keep track of. They came with the demon when he arrived here," I said, telling him just enough to really confuse him. "You're a right bastard sometimes. You know that, Alistair? You do this every time we talk about my sister, and you know something I don't," he griped, and sat on the edge of the desk. "Do I?" I asked, and he nodded. "I can only apologize, my friend. I seem to irritate those around me without meaning to lately," I said sadly, and covered my eyes with my hand dramatically. "Boss, you're an old vampire. Old vampires are irritating," he said, and I laughed. "Thank you. Every vampire over 100 needs to hear that they are irritating," I said dryly, and removed my hand to look at him. "No problem, boss," he responded, chuckling, and moved to the low sofa to the right of the desk. "Now for the reason I called you home," I said, and watched him closely. "Ah, I was wondering if you'd remember the reason you called me back," he said, and rubbed his hands through his hair and down his face. When he looked up again, his dark green gaze was steady and filled with the iron will and steely determination that had made me decide to make him my first lieutenant, even though he was almost entirely human. I held up a hand, forestalling what I knew he was going to say, and saw the steel in his eyes catch fire with temper. "Sarah is one of my oldest and strongest children. I saved her when her mother tried to have her killed as a babe, and I have never, not once, called on her to do more than she was capable of. Have I ever asked more of any of my people than they could give? Have I ever asked for more than their loyalty, Graham?" I said, and watched his face. "No, master," he said after a few moments. "In your opinion, did I ever treat that female as less than the powerful being that she is?" I asked. "You know you did not. I know you did not," he said promptly. "Then why, Graham? Why did she turn on me? Why did she turn on you, a man she had claimed she loved more than life on more than one occasion?" I demanded, my voice whisper soft and sinister. Graham's shoulders slumped, and he closed his eyes for a moment. "She loved you. I mean, she told me 2 nights before the attacks that she was in love with you, boss. Sarah loved you, not me. To her I was just a bit of fun and nothing more," he said, looking me dead in the eyes. I saw a reflection of my own betrayed anger there, and had to look away. Sarah had done what I had thought I had taught her not to, play with a loyal and strong man's heart. I remained silent and let the music fill the room as I waited. I had no fucking clue that her heart was taken. If I had, I would have never listened to her, and my sister would still have the people she called family. My sister wouldn't be alone out there. She would be going out with her team and kicking ass," he growled, his eyes starting to glow red, and his normally dormant fangs beginning to show as his power filled the room. "Calm yourself, Graham," I ordered him, slamming my power into him. Graham's own power pushed back at mine for a moment, and I thought he might try to test his strength against mine. But my friend wasn't in the mood to challenge me tonight, and drew a deep breath instead. Graham never failed to amaze me. In just 13 years he had gained enough power and control that, if not for the fact that he wasn't truly vampire, he would be able to go before the Line Council and be declared a master in his own right. And he was loyal to a fault to those he either respected or loved, something I thought might get him into trouble one day. He was also a man I would never want after my head. No matter how powerful I was, no matter how smart I might think I was, Graham would find a way to kill me and make it stick. I had taught him how to kill supernatural beings, and he, in turn, along with Merrick, had taught the hunters that had been killed that night, trying to protect a woman who didn't need protection from what they had been facing in the second alley. The hellhounds would have left them all alone had they stayed close to Aaron and not shot at him, and those four should have remembered that. The fact that they hadn't begged the question of. "Did you have a link into their minds?" I asked abruptly as the thought struck me. "Who?" he asked. "Clint, Jerry, Fiona, and Tara, the four hunters that were nearly always with your sister," I clarified. "Yes. Why do you ask?" he said slowly, and sat forward on the sofa. "Were you using the link the night they were attacked?" I asked, rather than answer him directly. "Yes, but the connection was being messed with, and I lost it shortly after they got away from the walker," he said musingly, and his eyes got wide, then narrowed to green slits. "There should have been no way for them to be killed by those hounds, not with Aaron being demon-kissed. By rights the hounds should have left them alone because of it," I said. "And that means?" he asked, even though I was certain that he already knew what I meant. His eyes had started to glow with dark green fire, and a small localized wind stirred his dark red shoulder-length hair, and his voice hissed through the room like a venomous whisper. "Their minds were being hijacked, my friend, by a higher-ranked master than you are," I said, and stood to replace the record with another. "By who, though?" he asked, then added, "There are a hell of a lot of high-level masters in this town, boss." Sorting through the records, I realized that each was a very good selection, and tried to make up my mind about which one I would truly like to listen to now. Decisions on top of decisions, I thought. "I am very aware of this, Graham, and will have someone looking into it. As to your question of whom, I can say with all honesty, I have no idea. I do have my suspicions and a few paltry theories, but no facts to give you to back them," I said, and finally chose a vinyl disc at random, placed it on the player, and set the needle. When I turned to resume my seat, I noted that he was watching me with a close and intense scrutiny. Hiding my slight surprise, I resumed my seat and returned his look squarely. "Your suspicions and theories are better and more accurate than most scientific facts any day, boss," he said, inclining his head slightly, and leaning back on the sofa, arms folded over his chest. "True, but I can't act on suspicion alone. It would be the height of foolishness to do so. I have been and am many things, my friend, but a fool has never been one of them, and have no desire to be labeled one now at this late date," I said mildly, and he smirked as Stevie Wonder's Superstition began to fill the room. I shrugged, then reached down and pulled a large, lined yellow pad from a drawer. Setting it on the desk, I retrieved my pen and began making columns, then labeling them. At the top of the first column I wrote Sarah, then penned my theory of where she had gone underneath her name, and contemplated the other information on the attacks 2 months ago I now had at my disposal. In the next column I wrote down the few facts we had, then moving on to the next, penned my other theories there, and then wrote my suspicions in the next. The last column I labeled conclusions and left it blank. Finished writing, I set the pen aside and handed the notepad to Graham as he sat forward again, and the song ended. Looking it over, he frowned slightly and his lips moved silently as he read. Every few moments he would glance over at me, puzzlement in his gaze, and then return to reading. 2 more songs went by before Graham finished reading and set the pad on the corner of the desk. He sat with his elbows on his knees, fingers steepled and tapping his lips as he gazed pensively at the notepad for long moments. He stirred finally and looked at me directly. There was weary resignation and a deep sadness in his eyes as he gazed at me. "So what now, boss?" he asked, and moved from the sofa to the chair across from me. "Now, Graham, I tell you why there are children in the house, and we retire for the night," I said, and retrieved the notepad from where he had left it on the corner of the desk. "As you wish. "Though I think we should begin making plans on how to deal with the traitor when we find her," he said, and settled back in the chair. "Tomorrow is soon enough for making such plans, my friend," I said, flipping to a clean page, and began writing again, quickly covering the lined paper with plans for the next day. "True enough. Now, you were going to explain the kids?" he said, and raised an eyebrow curiously when I glanced from the notebook to him. "I aided your sister with a walker 2 nights ago, and she was injured during the battle," I said, setting the pen aside and regarding him steadily. "Why was she fighting a walker? How bad was she hurt?" he asked with an undertone of worry. "Because she has no sense and believes she is the only being capable of saving Outer City from itself and the evil that stalks the nice people that live here," I said flatly. "So she has a hero complex. So do you, for that matter. And that explains nothing, boss, least of all why we have kids in the house, or how badly she was hurt, or why she was fighting a walker in the first place," he said, his tone irritated. Apparently her demon had a vision about it, where it would be that night, and Erin decided to serve and protect, as is her way when he told her about it, I said, and he stared at me. "Perhaps you should tell me the tale from the beginning, boss, and leave nothing out," he said finally after several long moments, and regarded me with faintly glowing eyes. "This tale actually starts 4 days ago." "Are you sure you want to hear it?" I asked, and he nodded. Not wanting to upset him unduly, I left a few things out, like the entire encounter with her 3 nights ago, and most of the subsequent conversation I had with her before we entered the fight 2 nights ago. I described the fight and my actions therein, and his eyes got wide. "And had the crazy woman not had a few grenades, all 3 of us would be dead now," I concluded, standing to turn off the record player and put it back in its hiding place. As hair-raising as that tale was, it still didn't answer the question of how my sister got hurt, or how bad the injury was, boss. "And just how the hell did grenades save you?" Graham said, resisting the urge to rub my temples to be rid of a headache I should not have. I turned to face him and examined his tense expression. I could get away with not telling him what he wanted to know. He was, after all, just an underling, and I was his master. On the other hand, I knew Graham quite well, and knew he would just ask the mangy wolf for the truth later if I did not tell it to him now. I also knew how much the man worried after his sister. I did not get us high enough to escape the explosion completely after I shoved the bloody thing into a hole Erin made in the walker with her rifle. Pieces of the exoskeleton struck her in the lower left side of her back and the back of her left thigh. She suffered great blood loss because of this, and is now residing in the first bedroom at the top of the stairs across from your room. The children arrived with Isaac 15 hours ago and are in the next room down. I left it up to the demon as to whether he would remain in the room with Erin, or whether he would seek his own room," I said, and saw his eyes beginning to glow brighter with anger. "Do not say what you are thinking, my friend. You would only anger me more over something that I have already tortured myself with for days now. As for the demon being in her room with her, they share a tent in that ridiculous mobile camp of theirs. They have shared a room for years, and no harm has come of it," I added, and slid the secret door shut with more force than was strictly necessary, then moved back to the desk and collected the notepad and my pen. Holding both in one hand, I strode past the front of the desk and the chair he was seated in, and headed for the door. Graham's voice made me pause with my hand on the door handle. "You've been trying to make yourself a part of my sister's life for years now, and here she is, in your home, practically at your mercy, and in need of some tender, loving care. So why do I get the feeling that you would have rather just dumped her back at her camp for Isaac to tend to?" he said, his tone bitingly sarcastic and cold. It was a tone his sister had recently acquainted me with, and I laughed bitterly at the irony. Closing my eyes, I drew a deep breath and answered him without turning around. "Because, Graham, that is precisely what I would have preferred to do. Because your sister will want it that way, I assure you. That way she would be happy and able to recover surrounded by those she actually likes, instead of being trapped in my home where she, undoubtedly, will not feel safe in my care." With that, I opened the door and left the study with blurring speed, the door banging shut behind me. At the end of the hall, I turned into mist to keep from running Myra over. As she turned the corner into the hall, I swept past her and into the foyer. "Alistair?" she called after me, her voice concerned. I ignored her and streaked up the stairs, and then, maintaining mist form, I continued down the second-floor hallway and flew up the stairway at the end to the third floor. Once there, I returned to human form, and still moving faster than the human eye could see, I made my way down the hall to the huge black lacquer double doors at the end. Pulling one door open, I entered the master bedroom and swiftly moved to the bed, the door closing softly behind me. A cold, harsh laugh fell from my lips as the door clicked shut and Graham's words rang in my head. If only my reply had been nothing but lies instead of the hard, cold truth I had been trying to come to terms with for days now. Erin would probably sooner see me dead than give me a chance to show her that I could be more than the blood-sucking evil being she believed me to be. I knew she remembered seeing me from the night I took her family out of the warehouse. I had seen it in her eyes the second time I met her, and I suspected that she knew that Graham, at least, was still living. Isaac had been very informative in his letters after he figured out that I was interested in her welfare, telling me where her team was going and who was on the team with her, and though he never truly mentioned how she felt toward me in any report he gave me, I feared that Erin would never see me as anything more than the monster that took her family away that night 13 years ago. I've never looked into her mind to find out for myself, and never would. I have thought about doing so, but I had done that once before and had learned things about the woman I loved that I very much wish I had not. Delia had given me complete access to her mind the year after we met, and until she was in her 25th year I had never used it outside of our private conversations when I visited her grandfather. No, Erin's mind was the last place I would want to be, and it was the last place that I would be welcome, and I knew it. It was in her every action when I was close enough to look into her eyes, and she never looked any higher than my chin when speaking to me face to face. Physical contact between us was a rare occurrence, and she seemed to actively avoid it whenever possible, resorting to force when she could not. I rubbed the back of my head and looked over at the dresser. Hanging on a hook in the wall above it was my favorite hat, mostly ruined now, and hanging next to it was Erin's helmet. I intended to return it when I could get David to install the new thermal software and navigational systems that I had requested from him. The boy had told me it would be done by August 13th, and I was holding him to it. That was another thing that Isaac had also failed to report, that she was telekinetic, and I wondered what else the half-demon had been keeping from me, though, to give him some benefit of the doubt, I had not sensed that she was psychic in any way. Perhaps she hid more from everyone around her than anyone knew, and no one noticed. I mused, probing a still tender knot on the back of my head. Regardless, her actions were fairly clear, and I fear that Erin will never see me as more than the monster that took her family away, let alone come to love me as I love her, and that, as they say, was the bottom line. And that hurts the most, I thought, and rubbed the back of my neck, sighing wearily. I wasn't a monster, and I wished that she could see that. I wished that she could see the man that loved her more than his own life rather than the monster that just wouldn't leave her alone. "And if wishes were horses, then even beggars would ride," I said harshly, and dropped the notepad and pen on the table beside the bed. The pen bounced off the table and fell to the thickly carpeted floor beside the bed. Why can she not see beyond what I am, to the person I am beneath? I asked the empty room as I bent to retrieve my pen, not expecting an answer, but receiving one just the same. "Aaron can't see who you are past the fear of what you are, my lord." The voice was a deep, rumbling, demonic growl that echoed through the room and momentarily froze me in place as I scanned the room with my senses. Then I streaked across the room to the large fireplace and the darker shadows standing in front of it. "What the hells are you doing in my private quarters, Isaac? Or should I call you Iracilion?" I demanded in a power-laden whisper, and he laughed. "It is good to see you too, Dad. Other than nearly killing the only human on Earth I care about when you were supposed to get her the fuck out of Dodge and back home in one solid, living piece, what's new?" he said, his voice light and mocking. I ground my teeth. I swear, sometimes dealing with Isaac is like dealing with a teenager, only much worse, I thought. "What Delia ever saw in one of Lust's get, I will never know," I growled, and released my power into the room, lighting the fireplace and several candles around the room. "Because you never asked Lay what she saw in me. I, however, asked her why she put up with your pig-headed arrogance. And you want to know what she told me?" he said, continuing before I could answer. "She said she put up with it because she loved the man you were when she was with you. Lay told me she loved you the way that you let her be who and what she was. She loved you, Nick, Merrick, Razul, and Renzo. She loved all 5 of you for the exact same reason that I called her Mom. All of you let her be who she was and never tried to make her change. And she said she would never change a thing about you or me," he finished in a low voice, and I stared at him, feeling the old anger boiling to the surface again. "I still have the God's forsaken letter that appeared in my rooms the day after she died in battle. I already know all of this, and I truly do not wish to relive that pain in my dreams tonight. That woman was the best thing ever created by man or gods, and she had meant the world to the whole keep, not just to the 5 of us that got that damnable letter. She meant everything to those that called her boss or mama. My equal, my best friend, my partner, my princess," I said, hitting my chest for emphasis on the next thing I was going to say. "My heart, damn it, since she was 16 and her grandfather tried to marry her off for the first time." My voice lowered to a pain-filled whisper as I continued speaking. "I lost everything but the family she had built for herself. The people she called her brothers and sisters, lovers and children, and those like me that she just called friends. We lost the center of our world the day she died. All of us lost something that day, Iracilion, and I remember it well. You need not remind me of it." I finished wearily and sat in one of the large wing-back chairs facing the fireplace, feeling heartsore and tired. I felt so very, very tired. Tired and resigned and frustrated. Tired of fighting a frustrating battle and resigned to losing the fight after all of this time. I had fought for my title as a human. I had fought my instincts after I was turned, and I had fought for my heart once. I was fighting for it again, only this time I did not believe that I could win, and my confidence in winning Aaron had been badly shaken 8 years ago. True, it had only been dancing, but I had lost to her on a dance floor when she was 17, and I had seen her take down Jason 2 months after she beat me. Seeing the elf lose had not made me feel better about my own loss, and His victory the next night had only made it worse. So I had resorted to following her everywhere she went, including following her to and from the club every night, just to ensure her safety. It seemed I was damned if I did, damned if I didn't where Erin was concerned. I apologize, Alistair. I'm just... Isaac's voice trailed off and he waggled his hand back and forth for a moment, then said, "Scared I'm gonna lose Erin like that," and flopped into the chair. I could understand that feeling all too well. I lived in fear of losing her the way we had lost our warrior princess and boss. Erin reminded me very much of that amazing woman I had known all those centuries ago. A woman so far out of my reach that she never told me how she felt while she was alive. I thought darkly and looked at the young half-demon slouched in the opposite chair. I smiled a bit as I realized that he was sitting the way Delia had when she was tired and beginning to fall asleep sitting up. It was odd how many of her habits Isaac displayed. "You need to rest, Isaac, and you need to stop calling the visions. They take too much out of you," I said sternly, suddenly noting the grayish cast to his obsidian skin.